against gender-based violence, against women, against children, against really anybody. It's been with us for quite some time. Now, it's not just merely sensitizing the public about it, but it's more than that. What we want to do, what the program intends to do, is to strengthen capacity of the public service to effectively plan and budget for the elimination of gender-based violence against women, against children, against even men. And also to eliminate harmful practices. So this becomes a norm, and that people know, even when they are born, that it's not good to be violent against anybody, against children, against vulnerable children, against women, against men, and so on. So that's the Spotlight Initiative. And we have started a course at the Civil Service College, focusing on all public servants, but beginning with the managers of the public service, so that they can build institutions within the service, budget, and have programs within the service which eventually will promote this fight against gender-based violence all through. And then the programs can also be measured, and they can be followed up, and so on. So really, this is what this Spotlight Initiative is all about. We want to eliminate it. We want to make sure that there's a culture that respects gender, that is against violence, that really does not aim at exploiting any vulnerable person. Yes. And we put it in the service. Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Honorable Minister. Let me now just invite to this conversation Ms. Atafwa, the representative here. You're welcome again, and just get to this conversation by letting us know how the UNDP ideally comes into this. What are these gaps that you saw that you really needed to fit into this program?
Well, first, let me thank you sincerely for having me and Mr. Moderator at UBC. And since I have the Honorable Minister online as well there with you physically, I wanted to also congratulate him on his reappointment, and really the very articulate way that he's outlined the issues that we are very concerned about, and a very topical issue as we discuss our country's development here in Uganda. Now, before I get started, Mr. Moderator, just permit me very briefly for our audience and viewers who may not know much about the UNDP. I just wanted to say we are the largest United Nations development agency on earth. We are concerned about development of nations, and that's what we seek to support. We seek to support structural transformation, of which gender is a part of it. We seek to support resilience of nations, of which gender empowerment is part of it. And we seek to support the agenda of the Sustainable Development Goals, which is basically focusing on leaving no one behind. And some of the people we leave behind are women and children, and also gender-related issues. So really at the heart of what we do, we believe that development can only be propelled when we can empower the right actors, including women and also children and girls in particular. So why are we involved in this space? And I think that we've had a long-standing relationship with the government of Uganda beyond even this online work, and I just wanted to situate the bigger conversation. We are programs in partnership with the government, from policy to programs funding. It really embeds into it the issues around gender, and most importantly also addressing the issues of gender-based violence, which is very much at the core of what we do. And therefore our support to government in relation to gender matters, our support to government even with the broader Ministry of Gender, which we helped establish in the 1990s, is part of driving the conversation around eliminating violence against gender-based violence. Now let me come to the EU Spotlight Initiative, which I think is at the heart of the conversation today, I wanted to recognize that this is an interagency, partnership where UNDP, UNICEF, UN Women, UNHCR, the Refugee Agency, and our resident coordinators office, with a part of a stronger partnership with government and the EU on this. Well, we are concerned around issues to do with institutional gaps. Particularly because when we want to address the structural issues that I talked about earlier on, we need to find why are we getting these issues. And part of what we are seeking to do as UNDP is to really strengthen institutions at the planning level, at the policy level, at the budgetary framework level, that we embed into it issues to do with how we eliminate violence against. So the public institutions, we've been working, for example, with the Ministry of Public Service, the Civil Service College. We have been working with the Uganda Management Institute, we've been Law Development Center, many of these institutions to be able to make sure that these things are truly embedded into them. So that's really at the heart of what we are trying to do. We've also then been working with a number of ministries, departments, and agencies, training them in many districts to make sure that at the core, where the action is, at the ground, we are empowering the actors on the ground to be able to do that. So this is really the entry point for us. The entry point for us is really the institutions, the legal frameworks, the advocacy, and making sure that, we empower the institutions to be able to do their work. Beyond the public sector, we are also working with the private sector, which is very important, Mr. Moderator and viewers, because again, we know that the public service employs a number of people, but it's still the private sector, employs more than the public sector, which means that we need to begin to focus more also on the private sector. And therefore, there again, we are working with a number of companies, big and small, to be able to make sure that in their own institutions, the issues around gender, it's really mainstream. Not only the issues around violence, but even issues around pay. How do we have women around the board, the table, to have conversations around decision making? So these are some of the things that we are doing. We have, as UNDP, have led a very transformational work with government and the United Nations family, for example, on another stream of work, which is very much complementary to the EU UN Spotlight Initiative, which is for the gender, empowerment, gender equality seal. And the gender equality seal is a seal that we give, if I may call it so, to private sector companies that would have gone through a process of orientation, but also refining their policies and processes, making sure that they are aligned to the best practices in the world. And we have over 90 companies that we have supported in that regard. So I wanted to pitch more the bigger work around the gender-based violence that UNDP is working on, which is one entry point is certainly the work that we are doing with the Honorable Minister and the Ministry of Gender as well, on the training and capacity building, the online program, but beyond that, also work to do with the gender seal, work to do with our programming, work to do with women's empowerment. And one of the things, Mr. Moderator, that we have learned is that, when you empower a woman, when you empower the girls, it's a way of also addressing the issues around gender-based violence. And 2 years ago, I had the humbling opportunity of accompanying our president to one of our projects in Limoto. And we had a woman who said, since I got this funding from the project and I feel more empowered, my husband is no longer beating me. And that's a clear demonstration that economic empowerment has a correlation also with reducing and eliminating violence against women and girls. So I just really want to go on and on, but certainly it's an exciting opportunity for us to see that we are coalescing around a very important subject matter of which the government is leading, and we as UNDP and the United Nations family is supporting.
Thank you very much. Now, just picking it up from where you leave it here, is you talk about women empowerment, which I think is a very good thing, because when you look at Uganda, we are highly rated in women empowerment and emancipation, and yet again, the violence against women also keeps escalating, and yet there is also empowerment of the women the other side. There is a feeling that when the women are empowered, that again, it dwarfs and makes the men more inferior. Don't you think that this is actually one of the issues why we see domestic violence escalating and growing in numbers, even when there is also empowerment of the women?
All right, so if I understood you correctly, your question is empowerment leading to violence against women?
Rightly so.
Well, I mean, I think practically it shouldn't. Practically, it shouldn't in many ways, because when a woman is empowered, in fact, we have this good proverbial saying that when you educate a woman, you educate a nation. In other words, the capacity of a woman to be able to support development agenda and development solution is key. So when a woman is empowered, it should not necessarily lead to violence against her. And actually, it should be the reverse. I think what we are dealing with, Mr. Moderator, is a much more complex issue beyond empowerment. It's a complex issue to do with behavior change that we need to be able to change. It's an issue to do with institutional strengthening. It's an issue to do with our legal framework, whether or not the laws are there. In Uganda, for example, we do have the laws. The question is whether we are enforcing the laws. The other thing is whether we do have the right legal services, for example, for women, for girls, even for men, to be able to address the issue. So I would not like to say that, no, if you empower a woman and therefore she gets money and therefore, there's more violence. No, it should not be the case. In fact, if we begin to see that sort of trend, then there's a big problem that we have to reverse. Because in other words, we are saying that don't empower the woman, because if you empower the woman, she is going to talk too much, and when she talks too much, she'll be beaten, and therefore keep her in poverty. Now, when we do that, we are reversing many years our own development agenda as a country. And we know for a fact that where women are empowered, whether in education, whether in entrepreneurship, whatever they are able to contribute to much more to the development agenda of a country. So I would want to see this thing much more as a complex issue, that we have to look at the interrelationship, we have to look at the norms, we have to look at the legal frameworks, we have to look at, so many dimensions to it, and we have to try to address them in a very concurrent manner, looking at all the sequencing, the backward and forward linkages. But if you isolate it and to say, no, don't give her money, don't empower her, and therefore she can talk too much, now that's not a good one. And this is what we are trying to address.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me come back to studios here and talk to Savia Mugwanye here from the Ministry of Public Service. Let me ask you a question that should have been asked to somebody from the Ministry of Gender, but because you're a woman and you are there, you should be knowing this. What is the situation like of GBV in this country?
Thank you so much, Mr. Moderator and our viewers. You realize that from the statistics that we have had a chance to look at, especially coming from the Uganda Domestic Household Survey.
The recent one?
That was 2016.
Oh, 2016,
that's
okay.
Probably a bit of about some
4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah. You realize that within that report, one of the things that has been reported is that you have about 52% of the women in Uganda who are facing spousal violence. That means they are having beatings and all types of abuse from their spouses. And then you have sexual violence being administered to almost 22% of the women in Uganda. That is statistics from the Uganda Domestic Household Survey. So those are very large percentages, and ideally they cause a state of alarm. You realize that also in terms of girls, you have young girls, up to 15% of the population who are getting married at a very tender age. That does not only have a social implication, a negative social implication in terms of the disruption of the education of these young girls, but also in terms of their health, because that means they're susceptible to being, to conceiving and being pregnant, and that exposes them to a number of health risks. So you realize that economically we also have a challenge in terms of the fact that once you have more instances of domestic violence happening and many of the women are being subjected to this, they cease to be productive. And you realize that in most of the households of Uganda that we have, about 25% of the households, they are dependent on the effort, the production of the women. So it is a cycle that gets largely affected because of the large numbers of the women that are subject to the issues of domestic violence, both in terms of spouses, in terms of being sexually harassed by wherever they are. Could be workplaces, it could be where they go to do their chores, it could be relatives within the homesteads. So that whole picture distorts the level of productivity, both at the level of the women and the level of even the homes, the stability of the homes is disrupted. And you realize also that what we have in terms of the institutions that are supposed to be enforcing, I think that's what the resident representative was talking about, the issue of enforcement, the issue of follow-up of those cases, also in terms of the statistics and in terms of the reports that we have, the follow-through to bring these cases to an end, to make sure the perpetrators are actually brought to book. That process is also a disrupted process. It's a distorted process. So in a nutshell, that is the picture that we have.
Honourable Minister, have you also looked very closely into the causes of these issues of domestic violence? Because we might talk about all the very good initiatives, but until we also address the causes of those, from the statistics that Savia here gives us, from that survey, over 52%, you talked about 52% spousal violence. Do we even know why these things keep happening? And have we tried to address them before we even talk about these very good initiatives of helping and educating especially our leaders?
Yes, I think we have a fair, good idea of what causes violence. One is education.
Education?
Yes, education. If a girl is not educated up to the level where that girl can work profitably, obviously that reduces her social status. And
so she becomes vulnerable.
Yes, vulnerable to violence, to exploitation by somebody who is economically higher. The other one is culture. Yes, the culture we have is that, yes, the woman must be second citizen. If she's married, then she must always be subservient to her husband, or even the relatives, the male relatives. So that's another aspect of culture. The other one is apart from the economy. If really the home is not economically well off, the tendency is that people are going to be very angry, they'll be on edge, jittery, and so on, and the next thing is violence. Yes, violence. And then these other institutional issues like lack of enforcement. Okay, there are very good laws now in the country, but enforcing them is a little bit difficult because of other reasons like culture and the social pressure and what have you. All those contribute in a nutshell to the violence against women, against vulnerable children, and sometimes also against the men.
Okay, so does a Spotlight initiative here address these issues at that level, or it also comes to the cultural level that you talk about, these other levels, or it's just centered to addressing you, the leaders, at maybe public service level? You heard from the resident coordinator here. I talk about the civil service, which of course know that, sorry, the private service, the civil society, which is actually bigger than the public service itself. Is this initiative intended to empower the leaders in the public service to be able to domesticate this to us, or there are plans of even getting to these others to also know the mandate and bit of it? The
UN has a separate program, really, for the other sector of society. They sometimes have partnerships with cultural institutions in the country. They, as the UN representative told you, they also partner with the private sector. Now, this particular one we are going to launch is really aimed at the public service. We have a course which has been prepared and is running. But this course, the main focus is really the public servant, not only at the top, but right through up the local government level. However, should somebody in the private sector want to take the course, yes, it's free to do so.
They can come in.
They can come in. Fortunately, this course is self-administered, and you take it at your pace. Yes, it's online, so you don't have to go to Jinja and become resident there for 1 month or so taking this course.
At the service college?
Yeah, the service college. It's online. So anybody really it is accessible to anybody who wishes to take it, both men and women. But this particular focus now is on the public servants. Why? Because they manage the country's resources.
Sure.
Two, I think they have a very big impact on society as well. Therefore, they first of all should know what they are supposed to do. Let them craft programs which will end gender-based violence, and these programs should be budgeted for, and then we should be able to measure the effect, the impact of these programs. Yes. So that's why we are focusing on these people.
Okay. You, Ms. Atafwa, come in again here and speak to us about this particular initiative, the Spotlight. What are your expectations, and how long is this supposed to run? How long is this initiative also supposed to run? And at the end of it all, what would you want to see come out of this initiative?
Well, a couple of things before. Feel free, Mr. Moderator, to call me Elsie. I think we can stay on first name basis. But before I answer your question in terms of expectations, if I may come back on the rejoinder just to supplement one of the points that the Honorable Minister raised, and you yourself, you asked, why do we continue to have the issues that we are having? And he mentioned a couple of points, including on the cultural dimensions. But I just wanted to raise three points very quickly, one of them being the low conviction rate of GBV cases. And that entrenches a perception that you can walk away when you do that thing. And that's what we are trying to reverse also with the program that we have under the EU UN Spotlight Initiative, but also importantly, some of the complementary programs that we have. The other thing, obviously, is the fact that sometimes we're missing the community element, where the community comes together to help with the prevention agenda. And I think that's one of the gaps. That's why we're beginning to see that there's a need for us to engage in that space a lot more. So if you see a young girl being abused, you walk away or do you report to the police? And that's something that we need to address as a community. And finally, just to say, while we still have those cases, is that we still have lack or inadequate institutional readiness to tackle some of the issues we're talking about. And that's why we're coming as a UN and UNDP family to be able to support that. Now, coming back to the question around my expectations, what do I want to see? And I think just to build on what the Honorable Minister said, the public service is a very important actor. In fact, one way or the other, all of us have been shaped in our orientation to life, in our orientation to work around the public service. And therefore, my expectation, indeed the expectation of the UN family and UNDP, is that we are beginning to build capacity in a very strong and robust way at the ground, where we are working with the ministries, departments, and agencies at the district level, at the local level, where things are rather institutionalized right from the beginning. So we want to see more of such happening. We want to see great uptake. We want to see more people engage in that spaces, and that's one of our expectations. The other expectation we have, and I want to thank the Honorable Minister and the government for leading the way, is that we want to be able to leapfrog in terms of the digital revolution. In other words, we should be able to say, whether I sit in Kampala, I sit in Mubende, I sit in Karamoja, wherever I am, I'm able to take a course online. And what does it mean? It means that we are able to reach out to more people than traditionally we would have been able to do if we're now inviting 3 or 4 people. And don't forget, Mr. Moderator, we are in a COVID period. And therefore, for us to be able to provide alternative options, for us to be able to leapfrog into the industrial revolution, it's something that is very exciting. And I do hope that this initiative that the government is leading will pave the way for more initiatives that are online, that are digital in nature, that can reach more people. But I think ultimately what we want to see in terms of expectation is change on the ground. I assisted the commissioner to give some statistics. And if I want to give statistics now, Mr. Moderator, I think we'll all be in tears. It's very clear that the fault lines are there when it comes to gender-based violence. We have seen even in the crime report of the Uganda police force, in this COVID period alone, we had 29% increase in domestic violence and violence against children as well. Now, these are things we want to be able to change. So our expectation is just that it's not going to be just an online course and then when we finish, we pack and dust and say it's done and tick the box. Our expectation is that when ultimately we have been able to go through this course, how does it change the way we do business on the ground, business on our policy programming and budgetary framework, making sure that, you know, the action on the ground is commensurate with what actually needs to be done. So indeed, for us, it's more the behavioral change, the structural transformation that needs to happen, and the fact that ultimately the beautiful Ugandan girls, the beautiful Ugandan women, the powerful women in this country will be able to live their dreams, and that they are not violated in many ways, as we have been seeing based on the statistics that we do have.
Madam Atafua, yet again, just running back to 2015 when we launched the SDGs. Now, in your earlier submissions, of course, you talked about not leaving anybody behind, and that's the achievement that we want to do. So we expect that by 2030, we need to have done away with this. But let's just consider the mantra of eliminating violence against children and women and girls and all the things that we're talking about. Are we really sure that we can walk this talk and actually achieve it? Because at the end of the day, we would love to see it happen. But the issues in here that cause us to see these vices being perpetrated in our systems, are we focusing to that also and ensure that we can achieve this?
So basically, Mr. Moderator, I want us to see the glass half full. I think Uganda has made tremendous progress towards its gender equality targets. Yesterday, we had the humbling opportunity of launching the new Sustainable Development Goals Roadmap by the Right Honorable Prime Minister, and where we discussed what needs to be done in the next 10 years as we focus in this decade of action, including issues to do with gender. So what we want to see is that where there is a will, there is a way. In other words, our collective action in addressing the fundamental challenges that we have when it comes to issues around violence against women and girls and children, for that matter, it's a very important one. And we have seen transformations happen in many countries where collectively, where we put our efforts by various stakeholders, including yourself as media, where you help us advocate on the issues, engaging the right stakeholders, the cultural leaders, the traditional leaders, the religious leaders, looking at the policies, looking at the laws, the enforcement, the legal services, empowering the women. When we begin to move collectively in that direction, I have no doubt that we are going to make great progress. In fact, yesterday, when we did evaluate, where Uganda is certainly above the regional average on the SDGs implementation when you look at it by extension, which means the government has made great progress, and we can build and consolidate the gains that we have made. So what I can say is that when we all come together, institutions, private actors, non-state actors, governments, media, we can do something. But I want to leave a fundamental point on this as I wrap up on this particular point, that can we do it? Yes, we can. And we are all change agents in many ways. We have the power to change things in our individual capacity as institutions. And I think this is where we need to begin to see some traction at all levels on this particular issue, which is very, very important. And for us as a development agency, we cannot achieve, and I repeat, we cannot achieve the development aspiration of our country without addressing the issues around gender, whether it's on structural issues, cultural issues, empowerment issues. We can't move. And therefore, when we put our act together, we can be able to propel the country to where it needs to be. Thank you.
I can't agree more with you on that particular one. It's been a very lovely one. I can't agree more. Thank you so much. I will come back later. Coming to you, Savia here in studios. How does this GB Online training course benefit the common man? Or how did you think it can benefit a normal mwananchi of Uganda?
Okay, thank you very much. I think what you heard from the minister was very clear, that we are starting with the public officers in terms of creating the awareness, giving them the capacity to be able to tell where the GBV issues, gender-based violence issues manifest, how do they manifest. These are the people that are at the core of the service delivery. They are at the service delivery points. We are talking about planners in institutions of government. We are talking about community development officers. Where do they offer the services? They offer the services by going to the communities. So in essence, they need to be able to have a clear sense of how they are going to be planning on addressing these issues of gender-based violence. So if they integrate those aspects in their work plans, that means they are able to run down into the community. The question you ask the resident representative, are we really going to make headway? We can make headway if we focus on creating awareness. So the planner who goes through our course now knows, how am I going to be able to create awareness down in the community, because that's where it starts. The male and the female counterparts need to know what are the effects of gender-based violence at homestead level, at the institutional level, in the community. What are the implications? And that means subsequently they should be able to develop even other supportive policies beyond what we have, and enforcement mechanisms, because there is a better understanding. So the common man stands to benefit, because the people who are entrusted with the policy implementation, enforcing the regulations, have been empowered, and they know the dangers of not doing what they are supposed to do. So ideally you realize that that should help to stabilize the communities. It should help to ensure that the women are comfortable, they are confident when they are working. The girls, even the young boys, are comfortable, they know the harmful practices that which can cause negative implications in terms of their way of life. But also because government needs to make policy from an informed point of view, and the policies they make are not for public officers. They are for the entire populace. So when we have capacity built for these public officers, that means they know how to pick the statistics that really matter in terms of evidence-based policy making.
Thank you very much. Honorable Minister, coming to here, you told us about the eligibility of the people that you are addressing, or those that you're targeting at this particular moment in time. How do they first of all get to that? How do they even apply, and how long is the course itself? And you also need to know, either from you or from Ms. Atafua, how long the initiative itself is supposed to last, but how long does the course take, and how do the public servants get in there?
Fortunately, it's a short course, lasting 1 month.
1 month?
1 month, yes. But it's also beautiful in that it's modular. So you don't have to, if you are not able to concentrate on the course for 1 month, you take one module, maybe of 1 day or a few hours, complete it, you are tested on it, and you know, certified that you've done it very well, and then when you are ready, you take another module. So it's a very convenient course, even for the public servant. Now, how do you apply? Yes, just apply our website, the Civil Service College, and then you get enrolled, and you start. The beauty of it that you start the course where you are. It can be in your office or to your home, so you don't have to go to Jinja to sit in a classroom. And yes, the public servant is the target, but also the political leaders. And I said every member of the community, really. In this, the idea is to make sure that everybody, ideally, has been empowered. You know, to not only become, to be aware of the dangers of gender-based violence, but also to become an active advocate against gender-based violence. Active. And that this eventually progresses into becoming an accepted norm or tradition. And that you don't have to think about it. Yes, or you don't have to be prompted that, hey, wait a minute, you are practicing violence. Just like in our cultures, we have totems. Your father or your brother does not always remind you, Semakula, don't eat the rugave.
Nobody has to remind me about
Nobody. And even, you don't have even any desire
for rugave.
For rugave, not at all.
At least rugave, I think, is not very edible, but for nsenene.
Yes, for nsenene,
for as long as you're in nsenene, then you know that you will not go for nsenene.
You will not go for that. So we want to achieve that.
That nobody will remind you
in the long
that
run.
don't make violence against
Don't mistreat your child, don't
mistreat
beat
your
wife,
husband.
don't say harsh things. And when you are providing, let's say, opportunities and chances, don't discriminate. So, oh, this is a woman, therefore, okay. No. So we want to achieve that state. And I think we are going to achieve it.
Thank you. And at completion of the course, what happens?
You are given a certificate.
You're given a certificate?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much. In just a few minutes, let me hear from you, Atafua, Miss Elsa Atafua, because the time is running out. In just less than 2 minutes, what could be your last remarks as parting shots for our program this morning?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, and thanks to UBC again for having me, and thanks to the Minister for really letting me be part of his panel today. It's very exciting. I think for me, just perhaps to come in very quickly before my last reflections on the Minister's point in terms of how long is this course, I think it has come to stay. It has come to stay, and I draw a parallel for us in the United Nations family. We are also civil servants. We are just international civil servants. There is no way you can even start working without going through a course on preventing of sexual exploitation and abuse. So it's become part of the norms of the UN, and I think that's what we are seeking to do. So it's come to stay. Now, what are some of my parting reflections? I think that, clearly, what we see now in the statistics is that we have made some good progress around gender empowerment, gender equality, eliminating violence against women and girls, but we still have a very long way to go. And that is, for me, what we need to seek to address. There are structural bottlenecks that we need to address, whether it's on institutional nature, policy nature, enforcement nature, or behavioral change in terms of the mindset. And therefore, what I'm seeking for us as we close the conversation is that let's keep on having these conversations, and we want to encourage public servants, private sector actors to take this subject matter very, very seriously. It is at the heart of the country's development, and therefore we cannot move forward as a country without addressing some of the fundamental issues. So my call is for us to deal with the issues, to be more sensitive to the issues, to find creative ways of addressing it, and to really push the enforcement agenda as we begin to bring more people in terms of knowledge and understanding of what we are talking about, that we eventually address and enforce the laws and the provisions that the country and the government has put in place. So that's one of the things. The final point in terms of closing remarks is that we need to be able to scale up. We have started this conversation in a number of districts, but we need to expand beyond that. We need to bring other MDAs on board who are not traditionally been part of the conversation so far. And for us in UNDP, I want to reaffirm our commitment, and by extension, the commitment of the United Nations family, that we are here to stay, we are here to support our Secretary General, and indeed takes this issue very, very seriously. And we have to work together to eliminate violence against women and girls. And as we push forward the NDP3 agenda and the Vision for 2040, for us, the conversation around the gender issue is something that we want to be able to keep alive. And so help us keep it alive to UBC and all you media practitioners. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Miss Elsa Atafua. We are again very grateful for having allowed to be with us on GME Extra on UBC today. Thank you very much, and blessings for you today, wherever you are.
Thank you too. Hope to be back again soon.
Thank you very much. Finally, Savia, in just 1 minute, your final comment.
Thank you very much. My final comment is just information to our viewers that this course will be officially launched next week on Thursday, 23rd September. And it's going to be at the Civil Service College in Jinja. We are going to have participation that is going to be hybrid in nature. We will have some few people on site, and then we'll have some few members of site. So we will have our partners, or the partners that we've been working with. They'll be part of that function. And once we have done the official launch, we will be good to go. And we want to start in-house, because charity begins at home. So we want to see that our heads of department within the Ministry of Public Service will be the first cohort to undertake this. But I call upon all other entities and all other accounting officers who are watching this program to plan for their staff to be part of this process of transforming the scenery in terms of addressing gender-based violence through building institutional capacity. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Savia. So this can only come in after the 23rd, after the official launch. That's when we expect it to start. Finally, from you, my minister.
Well, thank you very much for hosting us, and I'd like to thank Excellency the Resident Commissioner in UNDP for the effort, and of course the sponsors, the EU, the UN, for this wonderful program. By the way, it's running 5 years or so, but as you heard from her that yes, they've come to stay.
They're here to stay.
Indeed, yeah, and that's fine. So all I would say really that yes, this is a very good beginning. It has come, it is going to stay. Please, public servants, embrace it. Please, everybody in this country, there are more than 41 million of us, let's embrace it, and let's this be the beginning really of a very, very big fundamental revolution where we respect everybody, where everybody's rights are taken as a norm, and we no longer have these instances of violence of any kind. It has also some trickle-down effect as well. It's not now, it's gender-based, but then it could also next day it might be politically based or whatever. So once we have this base where there is no violence against danger, it is a big insulation that any other corollary or subsequent violence will be prevented. Please join us when we are launching this program on the 23rd, wherever you may be. Thank you very much.
Well, I thank you so much, the Honorable Minister Wilson Ruri Mukasa, Minister of Public Service in this country, and thank you so much, my sister Savia, a commissioner from the Minister of Public Service and the Civil Service College in Jinja, and thank you so much, Miss Elsie Atafua, the resident representative of the UNDP, for also joining us on today on our program. My name is Jagana Samakola Ziksoka, just wishing you all the best, and saying bye for today as we continue inspiring Uganda for God and my country. Good morning.